Support for this episode of I Hear of Sherlock Everywhere is made possible by the Wessex Press, the premier publisher of books about Sherlock Holmes and his world. Find them online at wessexpress.com. And the Baker Street Journal, the leading publication of Sherlockian scholarship since 1946. Subscriptions available at bakerstreetjournal.com.
I Hear of Sherlock Everywhere, episode 110, Sociable and Clubbable.
I hear of Sherlock everywhere since you became a chronicler.
In a world where it's always 1895, comes I Hear of Sherlock Everywhere, a podcast for devotees of Mr. Sherlock Holmes, the world's first unofficial consulting detective.
I've heard of you before. You're Holmes the meddler, Holmes the busybody, Holmes the Scotland Yard Jack in office.
The game's afoot as we discuss goings-on in the world of Sherlock Holmes enthusiasts, the Baker Street Irregulars, and popular culture related to the great detective.
As we go to press, sensational developments have been reported.
So join your hosts, Scott Monty and Burt Wolder, as they talk about what's new in the world of Sherlock Holmes.
You couldn't have come at a better time!
Hi, and welcome once again to I Hear of Sherlock Everywhere, the first podcast for Sherlock Holmes devotees where it's always 1895. I'm Scott Monty.
Yes, you are Scott Monty, and I'm Burt Wolder.
And we are rounding the corner on the conclusion of 2016. And boy, aren't we glad. 2016 has been a heck of a year. And a number of people I know want it to be done already. They want to move on to 2017.
Count me in that list. There were many good things this year, particularly many good things on the Sherlockian side, and as we will discuss in terms of friendship, but there were other kinds of upheavals, family-wise and otherwise, and I'm happy to see the back of 2016.
Yes, don't let the door hit you on the way out, 2016.
Let the door hit you on the way out, and I hope it hurts.
As a matter of fact, let me help you.
Let me help you.
Well, we're not here to talk about 2016, at least not in its entirety.
No.
I want to talk about a very specific portion of the year. But before we do that, let's have this brief word from our sponsor.
There's excitement in the ancient Anglo-Saxon kingdom of Wessex, which means we're looking forward to Modronit, our winter solstice festival. But there's no need for you to wait to celebrate. Not when you can look forward to Sherlock Holmes and Conan Doyle in the newspapers, Volume 3. This impressive collection covers July to December 1893, the most important and controversial 6 months in the history of Sherlock Holmes, his so-called death at the Reichenbach Falls, and the public's reaction. It will be released on Saturday, January 7th in New York, and available online the following day at wessexpress.com. Friends, it will soon be upon us, the bleak midwinter, when frosty wind makes moan, and earth stands hard as iron, water like a stone. When snow is falling, snow on snow, what better time to put a log on the fire and reach for the pleasure only a volume from the Wessex Press can provide. Choose yours today.
Always a delight to get down to Wessex. Pressing Wessex needs. Hey, speaking of Wessex, I know this isn't directly in the line, but it's somewhat related. I've been listening to a new podcast.
What?
Yes.
You mean there's a new podcast?
One that's not our own.
How could that be? Surely all the podcasts, have already been done. What's the new one?
The new one is called Revolutions, and it is by the same guy that hosted the History of Rome podcast, Mike Duncan. And Revolutions is a show that is looking at great political revolutions, and it starts out with Charles I in the early to mid 1600s, and all of the turmoil that led to the English Revolution of that period. So Wessex Press, even though the time in Wessex Press brought us back a little farther in British history, it just reminded me of the Revolutions podcast. So,
well, that's interesting.
There you go.
I did not listen to or know about the history of Rome. I have so many podcasts, and there's so comparatively little time, unless I'm traveling or unless I'm at the gym or unless I'm doing other things, really to listen, that I'm far behind. Yeah. So I don't know about the history, the other one you mentioned.
The History of Rome, that was a podcast, I think it took place back in the, I want to say it started around late 2008 or so, and ran clear through to early 2012. And it was tracing the history of the Roman Empire over, I think it was like 179 episodes. And boy, if I were a classics major again, this would be a great complement to the works that I had to read. It was just a wonderful total history of Rome.
Huh. How many episodes did they do?
179.
My goodness.
Yeah. But
how did they deal with Caligula?
Very, very gently.
That's remarkable.
Yeah. So Mike Duncan is back, and he's dealing with revolutions, and it's not just the American Revolution or the French Revolution. He looks at a variety of political revolutions. I think they're currently on Simón Bolívar and Gran Colombia. So anyway, we're not here to talk about revolutions. We're here to talk about Sherlockians and the things that they do. Yes. Recall that just a couple of episodes we re-aired two of our hits. We crammed them together into one about becoming a Sherlockian. What this little hobby is all about. We helped you with some of the just some of the language, some of the history, talking a little bit about the character and about the setting and all of that. But we also talked a bit about Sherlockian societies. We particularly couched it around the Baker Street Irregulars. But we thought this would be an interesting time to talk about attending a Sherlockian meeting. You've heard us talk with a number of people. Jacqueline Morris told us about Watson's Tin Box back on episode 107. We've talked to a number of people over the years, but Burt, in particular, has had the great fortune of traveling around the Northeast and inflicting his personality on people at Sherlockian events. And we thought, well, what a great time to kind of reflect on that and talk about some of the things that go on at Sherlockian meetings.
Yes, and just to start out, it seems like the lovely thing about having Sherlockian meetings is that there is history and precedent if you choose to use it, and a complete blank slate if you don't. So there are, I suppose, I never thought about this, but I suppose you could categorize meetings in a couple of buckets. There are meetings that are the continuation of a fine tradition. In other words, the meeting is always the same. Within certain parameters, there's an agenda. In some cases, the meetings are always the same to the extent that they're always dinner meetings, always on the same particular Friday in the month, let's say, and always follow the same menu, where year after year the same menu repeats, which can be a lot of fun. And then they have the same approach. There is a master of ceremonies, there are papers, there are rituals. New members are inducted into the society after having attended a couple of meetings. And those are a lot of fun. And when I think about organizations like that I know well and that Scott knows well, I think of the Speckled Band of Boston, and I think of the Sons of the Copper Beeches in Philadelphia. So go ahead.
These are some that I know even the Speckled Band goes so far as to have the same grace every year. Mm-hmm. They take no chances whatsoever. Will not leave caution to the wind when it says when it comes to saying the blessing before the meal.
Yeah.
And there is in some sense a grand tradition there. Now, of course, both organizations that you mentioned, the band and the Beaches, have carried on the tradition of being stag as well. And they are kind of dinosaurs in that regard. I don't know how it is that they still survive that way, but they still keep on that men-only tradition. Mm. And I guess the good news is, in both of their respective cities, Boston for the Speckled Band and Philadelphia for the Copper Beaches, they do have other active Sherlockian organizations that are co-ed. So there certainly is a means for people of all sexes to get involved in Sherlock Holmes in some of these settings as well. Mm.
And then there are meetings that, just thinking about this, there's so much wonderful variety. There are meetings that are very location-based. I mean, the band, obviously, the organization being in Boston, the organization being in Philadelphia. But Terry and Linda Hunt have an overall society called the Grillparzer Club of the Hoboken Free State, which has its roots in the original Grillparzer at Sittenpolitzeiverein, which was a progenitor of the Baker Street Irregulars, one of the clubs that Christopher Morley founded. But it also refers to some time in the late 1920s when Morley was engaged in owning a couple of theaters and restoring 19th century dramas in Hoboken. So there's typically a meeting in Hoboken, New Jersey, that has to do with an old haunt or an old something about Morley's experience in Hoboken. We've had walking tours, really interesting. And for those meetings, Terry and Linda bring out some wonderful things, artifacts and photographs and copies of sheet music that date back to those plays in the late 1920s. And then there's also a May program with that group that is in Long Island near Roslyn, where Morley lived. So you can get the idea that this is obviously very Christopher Morley centered. And the last major dinner we had, which we talked about and had excerpts on our program from May of last year, involved visits from Morley's actual descendants and some work involving some very interesting stuff involving Buckminster Fuller and Morley's friendship. So there's an effort that's centered on Morley and is in sort of these two poles between New Jersey and Long Island. But then go ahead.
Before you move on from that one, because I'm fascinated by it, when they say it's of the Hoboken Free State, and yet they have one of their meetings in Hoboken, they're really not in the Hoboken Free State, are they?
Oh, but they're about to, because one of Terry and Linda's projects is to reissue the Hoboken Free State passport. This whole idea of the Hoboken Free State dates back to the late 1920s when America was under prohibition, so you couldn't buy alcohol legally and consume it in public. However, obviously, speakeasies and alcohol was still widely available. It was just widely available on a basically clandestine and criminal basis. Mm-hmm. But Hoboken, apparently, one of the attractions that it had for Morley, in addition to the theaters and the seafront, he called it the seacoast of Bohemia, was that beer and alcohol and so on was more visibly widely available. So the idea of just going to Hoboken for a beer was, pretty much common territory. And I think somewhere around that time, Morley came up with I'm forgetting the historical details, so Terry will have to correct me, but I think Morley actually coined the phrase, this is the Hoboken Free State, because of the looseness around the alcohol regulation. So therefore, he didn't need to worry about prohibition. And I think at the time there may actually have been a passport that he had printed and provided to people. But those were the days where you could only get to Hoboken from Manhattan via the ferries before the path trains. Path trains I think did come in around the 20s, but the ferries were a major way of getting across the Hudson to get to Hoboken.
Okay. See, I was thinking it was Hoboken-free state. In which case I would say, New York has been Hoboken free since 1621. I mean,
Rhode Island is in the market for a slogan, having failed with cooler and warmer. Hoboken free since 1628 sounds pretty good to me.
There you go. That's all I can think of when I hear the Hoboken Free State. It's like, right. New Jersey is hardly Hoboken free.
Hoboken may check in, but it won't check out.
Yeah. Well, related to Christopher Morley and the upcoming Baker Street Irregulars and Friends weekend in New York, which of course is much more than a weekend. It starts unofficially on Wednesday, January 4th, and it runs through Sunday, January 8th. Part of that includes the Christopher Morley Walk. This is the 15th annual Christopher Morley Walk that's being led by Jim Cox and Dory Nash. It's a free activity to participate in. They recommend that folks bring money to pay for a Metro card and for lunch because as they walk throughout Midtown, they then make their way downtown a bit to 15 East 7th Street, and they end at the pub McSorley's. McSorley's is, I believe, McSorley's Old Ale House. It is, I believe, the oldest operating saloon in New York. And the good news is, and this was, it's been open for 162 years. They recently closed for a small period of time because evidently they had a rat problem there. Not the giant rat of Sumatra, but it was rats nonetheless that caused it to slow down. 42 rat droppings were found when a surprise inspection occurred by the Department of Health.
Luckily, they had the rat dropping counter with them.
Well, my biggest problem with that is, when I'm counting rat droppings and someone walks in and confuses me and I have to start all over. But evidently the pub's owner said that rats got in when a construction worker left a grate open during a gas pipe replacement. And they've since plugged up all the holes, and McSorley's is now open once again. Open for business. But it was established in 1854. So a good year.
Yeah. Well, there are taverns that have their history that go back farther than that. For example, France's Tavern. But I bet the McSorley reference has to do with oldest continually operating in the same location, probably.
Well, continually operating except for rat dropping.
Except for a couple of weeks, yeah.
Yes. But I guess Christopher Morley enjoyed McSorley's. Is that why they end the walk there? Do you know anything about that?
Well, I've been on that walk, and I love McSorley's because I went to college down in that area.
Oh, you did?
At NYU and Washington Square. And so McSorley's, is certainly within walking distance here. So I love McSorley's. I don't remember, I'm sure, in fact, I think Chris did an essay on McSorley's Old Ale House. So I think that's one of his essays. But so I'm sure that it would have been impossible for him to be around in the 1930s and not tumble into McSorley's.
Yes. Well, we were talking about Sherlockian gatherings and Christopher Morley. Yeah. What else did you have? You mentioned tradition?
Yeah, there's much more. So you've got, these societies that are founded in tradition. The menu can repeat. The grace can repeat. It's always in the same place. Then you have things that are anchored around someone like Morley and his experiences in this city and that city. But then there's just enormous creativity. For example, the wonderful thing about and frequency. So, with the Morley effort that Terry and Linda do, is a May meeting because that's Morley's birthday, and then there's usually another meeting during the year in Hoboken. And then, of course, the band is on its regular schedule, and the Copper Beaches are on their regular schedule. But then there are groups like ASH, the Adventuresses of Sherlock Holmes, which I'm proud to say most recently inducted me into membership, maybe an invested member of ASH.
You're an ash?
I am, after all these years.
Oh.
But the nice thing about ash is there's a meeting every month on, as you might expect, Ash Wednesday. So it's the first Wednesday of every month, and there's no agenda. So about 20 to 30 people pop up, always letting Susan Rice and Mickey Fromkin know in advance. And it's a very convivial, basically you pay for what you eat. It's at usually a lovely tavern somewhere in Midtown Manhattan. And that moves around a bit. And so that's just a great sort of social event. And then there are continuing groups.
Before we get to the continuing groups, I'm interested to hear about your ash investiture. So how did they decide to finally take the dive and welcome you in as a member? I mean, they must be completely misinformed. So how often, or how long, I should say, have you been attending ash functions?
Probably for the last 2 or 3 years. I just made it my business to go more regularly because there's always a reason not to go. You can't get out of the office. This is due and that is due. I took a look at my priorities and I said, I need to spend a little more time with these people because life is short. So maybe I could figure out how to do this.
Yeah. So they finally decided to give you an investiture. Is there a set number of meetings that one has to attend?
No, I don't think so. I think that it's...
How did they determine that you're worthy? I mean, I know you are, but I mean, how did they determine it?
I think it's just because they ran out of... I think every other Sherlockian probably has been pity. I think it was pity, and I think they said to themselves, this poor soul, he just keeps coming to the meetings. We should... Let's ask him. I think the thinking was, let's ask him if he'd like to be invested. And if he doesn't want to, then we'll suggest he should stop coming. And that wouldn't be a bad thing either. But I fooled them. I said, what a wonderful idea.
And what's your investiture?
Well, the nice thing about being invested into ASH is that they have a very open and engaging kind of a process. They ask you, they provide you, I was provided with a list of other members' investitures, and you're encouraged, they will be happy to give you an investiture or to give you an investment. I've lost track of the proper word usage here. Or to clothe you investments.
Yeah.
Or they'll be happy to assign you an investiture, but if you want, you can create your own. Oh. And so I decided that. So I now have this very lovely certificate, which says I shall henceforth be recognized as a full member of the adventuresses of Sherlock Holmes with the nom d'adventure, intervals of note taking and of meditation.
Oh, I like that.
With all the rights and privileges appertaining thereunto, this investiture commemorates past achievements and contemplates future enjoyment in this goodly company. And signed by Evie Herzog. I like that because those are two of my favorite things, taking notes and meditating. So that's why I picked that.
And if I recall correctly, that is from... the Boscombe Valley mystery?
Yes, well spotted.
Excellent. That was one of the scenes where Holmes and Watson were in the train carriage together, Deerstalker on.
Yeah.
We had the carriage to ourselves, save for an immense litter of papers which Holmes had brought with him. Among these he rummaged and read, with intervals of note-taking and of meditation, until we were past Reading.
Yeah, very fun.
I initially thought that was past reading.
Until we were past all reading.
Well done,
but there's also, an annual ASH, at least once a year, maybe more, a more formal dinner brunch. It's usually a brunch, and there's also a brunch at the end of the Baker Street Irregulars weekend. But the more formal, sort of semi-annual brunch, has a program of toasts and presentations and commemoration of departed members and so on and so forth. And that's a lot of fun too.
And of course, we talked with the founder of the feast, Evie Herzog, in episode 89, along with Susan Rice, who has been a longtime administrator and figurehead of Ash. So if you want to get a sense of the adventuresses of Sherlock Holmes and how they came to be in the first place, go on back and listen to episode 89.
And then there are other societies that have a completely unique, well, I guess every one of them is completely unique, but have taken a different approach to organizing their meetings. And I'm thinking there of the epilogues of Sherlock Holmes, which under Bob Katz's leadership has been, I'm embarrassed to say I can't remember what anniversary this was. It may have just been 30 years in the last couple of years. But the epilogues to Sherlock Holmes usually meets twice a year. And, one of the issues around these dinner meetings, for example, the Speckled Band, Sons of the Copper Beeches, is that, it's not, it's a substantive dinner for which you pay in advance, $50, $60, $70 or more, whatever, the particular venue happens to be for these meetings. The epilogues of Sherlock Holmes has, thanks to the genius of Peter McIntyre, who is a dedicated chef who provides all the food, including homemade ice cream, and including with a different flavor for each meeting, and including other things that he bakes and creates, and salads and so on. The freight for that is $10. Everybody pays Peter $10, and he provides all the food somehow. And the whole focus of the epilogues is on a discussion of Sherlock Holmes and particular stories, a particular story or stories. For example, a recent meeting did something a bit non-canonical, looked at the Sign of Four and the 7% Solution by Nick Meyer. And the bulk of the meeting is just a freewheeling discussion, brilliantly led by Bob Katz, who steers things along. That of course will talk about what's going on in these stories and what do we find significant, and then possibly what are the links between them? What do they have in common? What do they tell us about Holmes and his world? What do they might tell us about Conan Doyle and so on? So that's just a wonderful, and everybody joins in on the discussion.
Well, these stories have been around for, in some cases, over 100 years. How does Bob manage to keep the discussion fresh? I mean, haven't we done to death talking about all of these stories by now?
No, and that's part of the genius of the program, because while the stories themselves may be familiar, they can be looked at in different combinations. And when you look at one next to the other, you find very interesting parallels and very interesting divergences, which then lead to other questions. I mean, without giving the game away too much, when we looked at Sign of Four and 7% Solution, we looked at the relationship between Holmes and Watson in one and the relationship in the others. Of course, Sign was the second novel. And we also looked at the dynamic, what the characters and figures were engaged in each story. And as we did that, it became clear that you could think of the 7%, at least to some of us, that you could think of 7% Solution as a continuation of Sign of Four, or as a sequel of Sign of Four. So while the stories themselves may be familiar, there are endless explorations and parallels. And Bob is a brilliant moderator, because he has the essential moderator's gift of being able to portray total ignorance. So he will turn, that's a
role I have played with some degree of certitude in my time.
So he will turn to the group with a studied blank look in his face and say, "Help me out here. How does this begin? What happens?" And he just gets people talking.
I like that.
Yeah, it's terrific.
So how does one find out about the epilogues of Sherlock Holmes?
Well, I think all of these things are on Ron's calendar, Ron Fish's
calendar.
Yeah, Sherlockian Scion calendar. there was going to be a December meeting of the epilogues, but that's been, I think, the next one now is April. Well, in New Jersey, there's Mrs. Hudson's Cliff Dwellers, which has been running for years. That Ron, I think, is now more deeply engaged in, and plenty of others.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, lots of stuff going on. Certainly up and down the East Coast, it's really a hotbed of Sherlockian activity. Out here in the Midwest, of course, we've got the Amateur Mendicant Society of Detroit, which meets 4 times a year. Usually 2 of those venues are up for grabs. The other 2 meetings are in the same venue, kind of an expats hall up in the greater Detroit area. And then there's also there's another group around called the Ribston Pippins that Regina Stinson runs. They meet monthly and very informal. I think there's just like maybe a $10 cover, and they meet at the town hall or the library or a church. Depends on which month. And it's pretty much a potluck kind of thing. Very informal, So you see these societies that kind of run the gamut from traditional and staid and planned to those that are very much just friendly gatherings of people with discussions, with just a chance to associate. It's a wonderful variety, and there's nothing saying that you have to do one or the other. I think your experience over the last few months, Burt, indicates that you can do all of it.
Mm. Yeah, absolutely. And there's so many more groups. For example, in New York, the Priory Scholars, which Judith Freeman and Nick Martorelli have managed a brilliant resuscitation of. That, goes back many years. In fact, when I was in college, I was an early member of the society, as it was back in those days. It was founded by my old friend Chris Steinbrenner. And that meets regularly in Manhattan on a Saturday, sort of midday, usually at the church, lately at the Churchill Tavern, which is a lot of fun. When you go to the washroom at the Churchill Tavern and close the door, there are recordings playing of Churchill's speeches.
If the British Empire and its Commonwealth last for 1,000 years, men will still say, this was their finest hour.
And and that's a lovely group with a lot of, there's it's sort of a pseudo lesson plan because of the theme, of schools. And so there's a sort of assigned reading of a particular story and a very interesting quiz and toasts and things like that. That's a lot of fun. And then there's the Cornish Horrors in Rhode Island that I've been a part of for, just so many years, that usually brings out 30 or 40 people. We just had a terrific meeting with a presentation by David Hoole that was very interesting, of artifacts associated with Sherlock Holmes as usual, and a terrific paper that Greg Darack delivered about the Festival of Britain in 1951, the festival that re-energized global interest in Sherlock Holmes and led to the recreation of the Sherlock Holmes Society of London. So there are many of these societies that have, more formal programs with papers and very interesting scholarship. And then the Men on the Tour, which you remember from Connecticut, which is still going on, with Mike Burdan and Greg Darack. And in fact, the Cornish Horrors and the Men on the Tour are going to have a joint meeting next April somewhere in northern Connecticut, probably around Mystic.
Oh, wonderful.
So it's, you can talk about this stuff for hours and hours and hours.
Yes, but we won't do that.
No, but we would like to hear from you. What is your local Sherlockian group up to? We're in contact with lots of people around the country, including Steve Mason and the Bark Lone Star and other people. We'd be very interested to know what's going on in your scion, and if you have got your own particular slant on keeping green the memory of the master. And we would just, love to know what you're up to.
Absolutely. And as a matter of fact, we're going to chat on our next episode with someone who brings all sorts of joy to the scions and meetings that she attends. having seen her recently at the Ash brunch, and a couple of years ago at a scintillation of Scion 7. Mm-hmm. So stay tuned for that.
Oh, yes.
That sound can only mean one thing. Yes, and that is the news.
Oh, the news.
That is evident. You know, there's been a lot of fake news in the news lately. I don't know if you've been following that. Folks are up in arms that Facebook has led to a rise in the rash of fake news in this election year. But we don't want to bring you fake news. We want to bring you hard-hitting, real Sherlockian news.
Well, I don't know how hard-hitting the news is, but I did want to point out that at the recent ASH meeting, picked up some info here. You know, there'd been some discussion, as you know, because you were involved in the early stages of it, around the future of Sherlockian.net. Chris Redmond's multi-decade activity.
Yes.
It will now be hosted and updated by Michigan State University.
That is right.
As I learned from Liza Potts, who will now be taking that on. It's connected to an effort that she is engaged in at Michigan State University called WIDE, W-I-D-E, and that stands for Writing, Information, and Digital Experience. So I believe she will be having her larger network of folks engaged in the WIDE program there, or that particular track at Michigan State, involved in the next step of Sherlockian.net. And I found all of that pretty interesting.
She's casting a wide net.
Oh, how good.
Oh, boy. Actually, I am having coffee with Liza tomorrow, locally, since we're only about... well, halfway point for each of us is about 45 minutes, about 90 minutes apart. So we are getting together, and I've been recommended to her for a number of reasons. One, just professionally, what I do. She's talked to her students for a number of years about my career and travails at Ford. And she's also asked me to serve on the advisory board for the future of Sherlockian.net as it pertains to the WIDE project. So...
Oh, good.
Honored to be part of that and helping to oversee it.
Good. Now, this coffee you're going to have with her, is it calf or decaf?
Oh, it's always calf. Right. It'll be at Panera in Brighton if you want to join.
I'll be right there.
Well, in addition to updates like that, we also have some sad news to share. The actor Andrew Sachs has passed away. You may recall that Andrew Sachs was Manuel in Fawlty Towers. But, of course, he played Dr. Watson in The Further Adventures of Sherlock Holmes on the BBC radio program. And Burt Cools talked to us about him and that series in episode 69.
Would you mind?
Oh, not in the least.
Thank you.
You played that for me just a few days after we first moved in here.
Did I?
I didn't have the least idea what to make of you.
Have you now?
Oh, I think so, yes. Maybe. You know, I love these moments. The case is solved. Everything's over. We're back here in the warmth and comfort.
Until the next client comes along.
And then off we'll go again. I wish it could always be like this.
Watson, it will.
How can it? Nothing lasts forever.
It will because of you. Because of your stories. Don't you see? It doesn't matter what happens here, in the real world. We're more than reality, you and I. You, my friend, have made us immortal.
That's quite a thought.
It's the truth. As long as there are mysteries and murders,
and fog and fear,
and terror and injustice.
I'm Sherlock Holmes, private consulting detective.
And John H. Watson, chronicler, comrade and friend.
We'll be ready.
Waiting for the dramatic ring at the doorbell.
The game's afoot.
Just a fantastic Watson. And in addition to Andrew Sachs, 2016 cannot get away quickly enough. There was almost the very next day, another actor passed away, Peter Vaughan. Peter Vaughan actually played Charles Augustus Milverton on the BBC radio, but he also played James Turner in the Granada version of Boscombe Valley Mystery. Bringing us back to note-taking and meditation once again there, Burt. Of course, Peter Vaughan was more recently known for his role for 5 seasons on the Game of Thrones, but we will remember him for his turn in the various Sherlock Holmes adaptations. And I think we haven't had a chance to talk about this either. I mean, talk about the obituary section. Fritz Weaver passed away.
Oh, yes.
And we had the great fortune to have spoken with him on episode 26. Wonderful, wide-ranging conversation. We had some of the musical numbers from Baker Street to share with him, and it really was a musical stroll down Baker Street. I'm so happy you were able to secure him via the Players.
Yeah. Well, it's sad. It was wonderful to talk with him then. That was a real high point, I think, and for me anyway. And to find out also that he was such a Sherlockian. But I was sad that we could never get him to a dinner or a meeting, largely because he'd been ill. You know, he'd been pretty much right after we spoke to him. He kicked off a period of illness there. Yeah. But he was quite an actor, quite a gifted fellow.
He was. The world lost a fine actor. And if you are heading to the Baker Street Irregulars and Friends weekend in New York, we hope to see you there. Stop by and say hello. We will be at pretty much every event. Get on over to bsiweekend.com to check out what's available for you to attend. It is just about all open to the public except for the BSI dinner. Lots of things to choose from there, from the very high end to the very low end. But make sure you get by the vendor's room on Saturday morning and check out all the sites to see. And in addition, we have a post about getting the most out of the BSI weekend, tips and tricks for managing life in the city during a January weekend. So you'll want to check that out.
And how is the project coming for the virtual reality live stream of the BSI weekend? Are we pretty much ready to go with that?
Well, we were actually planning on releasing the iHost drones this year in the Yale Club. But I've heard back from the fire marshal in New York, and we've been restricted to flying no further than 8 feet above heads. And the problem is if Kareem Abdul-Jabbar shows up again, we may have a personal injury lawsuit on our hands. And we know Les Klinger, while he practices law, it's only tax law. So we'd really be in a world of hurt if that were the case.
I'm deeply disappointed.
Yeah, maybe next year. Maybe next year.
We need a deerstalker-shaped virtual reality helmet that we could put on.
No.
Or maybe that'll be a Sherlock Holmes brand product. That's not a bad idea.
Yeah. Well, speaking of sponsors, we do have one more that you need to hear from. When you crack open the yellow-backed covers of the Baker Street Journal, you find exactly what's advertised. The best Sherlockian scholarship you can find anywhere. From scientific analysis to thoughtful essays, it's a conglomeration of the work of the top minds in the world of Sherlock Holmes. But as we've been talking about meetings and societies in this episode, then what about those in the Baker Street Journal? Well, as fate would have it, the Journal has long been a champion and supporter of events that happen at the local level. Less now than in years past, you can find meeting notes and summaries of various dinners and gatherings from Sherlockian societies all across the country, from the Friends of Irene Adler in Cambridge, Massachusetts, to the Diogenes Club of the Monterey Peninsula. You get a slice of life of Sherlockian societies. When the journal was first founded in the 1940s, such society updates were the lifeline to Sherlockians out in the wild. Those days long before the internet meant that ideas, scholarship, and joy by association happened via delayed correspondence, not from blog posts. Well, if you get a copy of the EBSJ, you'll get a glimpse into these many time capsules of Sherlockian societies. And you'll be able to see firsthand the evolution of them, not to mention all of the many articles, cartoons, and more. Stop by BakerStreetJournal.com and pick up your EBSJ today. All right, well, now that we have the Baker Street Journal on our minds, it's the perfect opportunity to delve into the gas lamp. The feeling that always strikes into me, same as always. Well, in this case, we've chosen the 1958 Christmas Annual. As you know, the Baker Street Journal puts out a Christmas Annual. Now it's been going on for steadily for about 18 years. 18 years. This year it's about the William Gillette silent film. And if you go to BakerStreetJournal.com right now, sign up for next year, for 2017, you can be sure to get that Baker Street Journal included with your subscription. But the 1958 Journal included a poem, and it was interspersed with a song from a meeting. I'm not sure what gathering this was at, but it does manage to reference Christopher Morley and Nero Wolfe, and it's written by Charles E. Lauterbach, and it's called The Friendship Club. The convention of accepting Holmes and Watson as real passed beyond argument long ago. They have the reality that accrues only to the great symbols and cartoons. There are no haggling comparisons in that realm of life beyond life. The detective and the doctor move with all the other great pairs of masculine good humor, with Don Quixote and Sancho, with Crusoe and Friday, with Jim Hawkins and John Silver, with Huck and Tom. Their adventures are a textbook of friendship. That's a quote attributed to Christopher Morley in his introduction to Sherlock Holmes and Dr. Watson. While wandering on the Sussex Downs, I sought a moment's rest beneath a bush of golden gorse, by drowsiness oppressed. There as I sat, a mystic haze obscured the glowing sun, and fancy faring unrestrained, a lovely legend spun. Upon the hillside I beheld skep on skep of bees, all wafting cargoes from afar, over flowery seas. A cottage loomed against the sky upon the misty crest, and there before the portal stood a knight in armor dressed. Beside him sat a paunchy squire upon a lop-eared ass, that calmly switched a listless tail and nibbled at the grass. A wandering knight upon the downs was a curious incident, so up the gentle slope I climbed to find out what it meant. Before I had reached the top, the two had disappeared inside. A lance stood propped against the eaves. The door was open wide. A roar of greeting rose within as laggards came to view. "Hi, Don, old top, how's Dulcie, eh? And Sancho, how'd you do?" The group that sat around that board will never be forgot. Disposed in pairs and smiling all, they seemed a happy lot. And at their head there stood a chap who was both tall and thin. He looked quite stern, but in his eye there lurked a friendly grin. Down at the other end there sat a man of 20 stone, who wriggled in a wobbly chair with sad protesting moan. The chairman brought his gavel down. "The time has come to sing. Please join me in our friendship song and make the rafters ring."
In friendship's name we gather here, no other name so precious. With happy smiles and voices strong, we lift our hearts in joyous song. In friendship's name we gather here, no other name so precious. Oh, treasured hours that we have shared in friendship's dear devotion. Together we have faced the years, sometimes in joy, sometimes in tears. Oh, treasured hours that we have shared in friendship's dear devotion. We pledge anew our loyalty forever and forever. True friendship gives, makes no demand. When shadows fall, holds out a hand. We pledge anew our loyalty forever and forever.
And now to business, gentlemen. Upon our sacred scroll, your honored names have long been writ. Please, Watson, call the roll. Don Quixote and Sancho Panza, Jim Hawkins and John Silver, Nero Wolfe and Archie Goodwin, Peter Wimsey and Mervyn Bunter, Robinson Crusoe and Friday, Sherlock Holmes and John Watson, Tom Sawyer and Huckleberry Finn. Some names I could not understand. I was outside, you see. But those I heard I've jotted here. A famous company. The big man at the end still squirmed upon his weary chair and fidgeted with nervous fear, a picture of despair. Then sudden came an awful crash. The chair could take no more. "Archie!" there rose a frenzied cry, and Nero hit the floor. Amidst this wild phantasmal rout, the spell went pfft, of course, and there was nothing left at all except a clump of gorse. I roused myself. The sun was low, athwart a crimson sky, and on my nose there sat a bee with mischief in his eye.
Wow, that was fabulous.
That was fun. I don't think I had ever read that before.
Oh, I have no memory of it at all. That's fabulous.
It's just happened to come across it here. So.
Well, I love the topic, and despite the fact that I had to sing it, I love the idea of a friendship song.
I think you did a lovely job. I'll still be friends with you after that.
Thank you. That means thank you.
Well, if you could show your friendship for us by doing a couple of things, we would appreciate it. Hey, how about helping us out on Patreon? $1, $2, $5, $10, maybe even $25 an episode. Your support would mean the world to us. It helps us cover the administration, the production costs, perhaps equipment. Well, maybe even if we have to travel to go see some of the guests that we are trying to get on the show in 2017. Won't you consider supporting I Hear of Sherlock Everywhere by pressing that orange Patreon button that you see on our site, or heading to patreon.com/I Hear of Sherlock. We could also use your support on iTunes. Head over to bit.ly/I Hear of Sherlock and leave us a rating or review on iTunes. Tell other people what you think of the show, even if it's, well, let's keep with the fake news, shall we? Make it a good rating, a great review. That's what we appreciate. But just get on over to iTunes and let people know what you think of the show. That would be fantastic. And finally, if you want to let us know what you think of the show, there are a myriad number of ways to do that. You can call us at 774-221-READ. That's 774-221-7323, and leave us a voicemail. You can hit us on up at email at comment@ihearofsherlock.com. You can visit our website and leave a comment in the show notes there. This will be ihose.co/ihose110. Or, of course, find us on the various social networks as I Hear of Sherlock. Well, I suppose we've done about as much damage as we can do this episode.
We've done it again.
Unless there's any more that you're planning to do.
Oh, no. I'm very happy, very content.
Excellent. Well, until next time, I will remain Scott Monty.
Yes, and I'll stay Burt Walder unless I get a better offer.
Let's hope not. I like you just the way you are, neighbor.
I knew there was someone who did. Thank you.
Yeah.
The game's afoot.
You know, I'm afraid that in the pleasure of this conversation, I'm neglecting business of importance, which awaits me elsewhere.
Thank you for listening. Please be sure to join us again for the next episode of I Hear of Sherlock Everywhere, the first podcast dedicated to Sherlock Holmes.
Goodbye, and good luck, and believe me to be, my dear fellow, very sincerely yours, Sherlock Holmes.